So it's a beautiful beginning of the week, so let's jump into yet again another Transformer Slag podcast Patreon listener question. Once again, if you want to be part of the Transformer Slag Patreon, help support the podcast, let us know we're doing a half-decent job here in the Transformer world, giving you the news, the facts, and everything that's going on in our hobby. Join us on patreon.com/protoman. Check the pinned comment or the description below. What does that get you if you give us your hard-earned money and let us know that we're doing okay? Gets your name in the end credit scroll at the end of every segment moving forward. Access to the exclusive Transformer Slag Patreon Discord, where we talk Transformers, we break the news, we share lore, we share deals so you save money in your hobby. Also gives you access to a whole bunch of different stuff depending on how high on the tier of the Patreon you are part. And one of those being the Patreon listener question. We have a Patreon listener question from Zeta Prime. And Zeta Prime wants to know, and this looks like it's going to be a big one. Protoman, I have a question for you for the Patreon listener question. What is the history with Transformers crossovers? I personally would love to see Halo, Skyrim, or Fallout have at least some form of Transformer crossover or transforming toy, but that's just me. What would you like to see become a Transformer crossover? Thanks for what you do within the fandom, and I hope all is well, Zeta Prime. Well, thank you, Zeta Prime, and I hope all is well as for you too. The holiday season is coming up hot. I think as of this recording, we're like 5 days away from Christmas. Woo! Anyways, so when we're talking crossovers, I mean, that's a loaded one because I find within the fandom, we use that term a lot now to reflect all the collaborative stuff that we're getting. But I mean, that term is actually something that came up later within the crossover stuff. Like, it wasn't initially called Transformers crossovers, and I'll get into that. But, I mean, when we're talking like stuff that, and I use air quotes here, crosses over with Transformers, I mean, the very first true example of that was that 1985 Pepsi Optimus Prime, the original release. Came out in 85. They had a Canadian version also, which had a bigger sticker. That was kind of like the first ever true Transformers is a transforming product, and it crosses over with another brand. But it was just, in this case, a soda brand, and it was just a sticker job on an Optimus Prime toy. It wasn't anything too special. And then, like, if you really want to go into semantics, it's like, I mean, if you want to, like, talk about, like, Energon Snowcat, because Energon Snowcat, the character in the Energon toy line or Super Link, transformed into a G.I. Joe Cobra Snowcat. So it's like, okay, we're getting there. Now we have kind of a G.I. Joe crossover, but it just doesn't have that blessing on the packaging. It's just more like a wink and a nod. Hey, check it out, you know? And they do that a whole bunch of times with the G.I. Joe brand, but I think that's kind of like the first time we've seen something like that just in crossovers in general for Transformers. And that was 2003, 2004. And then probably the last one of that era of, I'll call it the confused crossovers, was a Tactics, the toy line. You know, there was WizKid was doing this line called Hero Clicks in 2002 that was blowing up and making tons of money. And Hasbro looked at it and went, hey, we want to get on that game. We want the tabletop community. So they created their own version for, I guess, a more simplistic kind of audience. And they created a Tactics, and it involved Transformers, the Marvel properties that they had, and the Star Wars properties. And it's kind of, in a lot of ways, the first time all of those properties crossed over against each other in a lot of ways. But, you know, there's a certain something that was coming out around that same time, which we'll get into in a moment. But that line didn't do very well at Tactics, and it got canceled, and a whole bunch of designs never saw the light of day. Now, before we get into the Western side of things, because like I said, there's different eras. There's that confused era. There's what I like to call the Japanese, the label era. Literally, it's called the label era. And then the Western era of crossovers. And then we have the collaborative era that we have today. So let's go into the Japanese side, because you had like all of these different collaborative efforts that were being done with Takara, and they were always something label. So like you had Music Label, which was Transformers mixed with, you know, iPod devices and MP3 devices, and you had all the Music Label stuff with Soundwave and iPod docking convoy and everything like that. Then you had stuff like the Disney Label, which was 2009 to I think it was like 2011, where, you know, they took They took Mickey Mouse and he turned into Optimus Prime, kinda. And then you took Donald Duck and he kind of turned into like a bumblebee. And then you took Buzz Lightyear and he kind of turned into a space shuttle, but not really. It's those were wacky ones, and they repainted the hell out of those things. You had the sports label ones, which they turned into Nike shoes. And it was like, oh, okay. It's Optimus, it's Megatron, and then Optimus repaints into Ultra Magnus, and supposedly they were going to do a Starscream out of the Megatron. It's kind of historically the first time both an Optimus, a Starscream, and a Megatron all share the same mold and sculpt. Kind of funny how that works. And of course, we'd see that again in the future. We'd see like another Megatron exclusive repaint with Nike shoes or Nike shoes and stuff like that. That was the sports label. Then they did device label, which was them working with Toshiba, and they were doing like USB ports and USB hubs and stuff. And that was like the Ravage USB port and Tigatron and Triptychon, and then they did the blaster thing. There was a whole bunch of wacky stuff with that. Again, that was the device label era. There was a lot of that. I know I'm leaving some stuff out, but just to give you a general idea of what was going on around that time. All of that kind of ended around 2010, 2011. But then we fall into the Western side of things, where they were doing all the Western kind of releases, and that's where like we fall into the crossover era. And it technically started unofficially in late 2005, early 2006, more so in 2006. And it started wasn't even called crossover, it was just Star Wars Transformers. And they started with Star Wars Transformers. They did that very first wave with the X-Wing, Mark Hamill, a.k.a. Luke Skywalker, the Boba Fett, the Grievous, and the Darth Vader. And they were just going to test that market. Well, let's see what happens. And it was being done by a completely different design team. It was a Western design team, not the typical Takara Hasbro collaborative stuff that was going on at that point. So they just kind of did that thing. And it had tons of QC issues. There was a lot of growing pains of understanding how to make one thing turn to another from that different design team. But it sold extremely well. There's just a ton of Star Wars fans that wanted that to happen. And especially at that time in 2005, 2006, Star Wars fans were crazy collectors that were buying anything on the market. And that line kind of found itself. I mean, it was around for so long that I think it was like around 2010, 2011, 5 years after its debut. They kind of started to find their groove and figure out how to make stuff. And so that's where you had a lot of designs that were actually pretty good. A lot of those clone troopers were pretty good. A lot of the larger price point stuff in that era, not counting the Millennium Falcon, that one had a ton of problems, but I'll get into that in a moment. But like the Death Star was pretty good, the Darth Vader one, the Quad Changer Anakin. They created this kind of core class price point, which they called Class 1, which had like, a small Anakin, small Obi-Wan. Those were pretty cool too. They found themselves afterwards, after 5 years of putting this stuff out. The Yoda is a funny one too, if you could pick up the Yoda. It's okay. They weren't great, but they were okay. And then around that time, when these were happening, because originally it was called Star Wars Transformers, but halfway during that huge 6-year span that line existed, around 2008 they dropped the Star Wars Transformers title, and it became Transformers Crossovers, because they introduced another brand with it in 2008, and that was the Marvel Transformer stuff. And that's where we have Marvel Transformer crossovers, Star Wars Transformer crossovers. That all started in 2008, and it was kind of the same thing. It was just like, here's a design team that isn't really used to doing Transformer toys, Western design team. And what sucked about this one as opposed to the Star Wars one, at least it was Star Wars characters transforming into iconic vehicle modes. In this case, it was Marvel characters transforming into not really iconic anything modes. It was just kind of like, how do we make, Thor a jet, or Hulk a tank, or Wolverine a Hummer, or Spider-Man a motorcycle? What are those connections there? There is none really. Maybe some of those Iron Man ones a little bit, but we'll get into that in a moment. But it's just, the line didn't do very well. It was, a lot of those molds were repainted like crazy. There was QC issues here and there. And then as the line was starting to get quiet towards the end of its run, only 2 years, they kind of rebranded, and they just made it only Iron Man, and it became like an Iron Man Transformer line. but not really Transformers, because the Transformer brand really wasn't on it, and it was kind of more to promote the Iron Man 2 movie at the time, and then later Iron Man 3. So, you know, it kind of died off along with, at the same time, the Star Wars Transformers line. And that was kind of the death of the official death of crossovers. That was it. 2011, bye-bye, it's done, right? And that's when we would never hear Transformers crossovers again. So that's why when people say Transformer crossover, it actually died in 2011. In 2012, Hasbro kind of played with the idea of still doing transforming crossover stuff, but not using that branding. So there was like the Marvel Flip Attack line, which when the Amazing Spider-Man movie came out, that's the one with, what's his name? Andrew Garfield and the Lizard. So when that came out, they did these like jump starter bootleggy, again, it's done by Hasbro, so it's not a bootleg, but these jump starter kind of transforming figures. And nowhere on the front of the packaging did it say Transformers. It was just Marvel Flip Attack, and you had Spider-Man and the Lizard being jump starters and everything like that. On the back of the packaging, there's a small mention of Transformer technology, but it's like very smallly written there, and that's it. And that only lasted, again, 1 year, 2012, and that was that. Then we enter another different era, and it was, again, back to the Japanese side with Takara, and they were doing like little things here and there. They did a crossover with Kero Ace magazine with Kero Scream, which was like Sergeant Frog for people who watch anime and stuff, or big model kit builders. They did a crossover with that, with movie Starscream. I actually did a review of that toy many years ago. They did the video game stuff where it was like a Mega Drive Megatron and Sony PlayStation Convoy. They did that crossover thing too. They did with Q Transformers, those little cutesy Transformer things. Q Transformers had a ton of crossovers, which led to a whole bunch of other product too. They did Hello Kitty, Evangelion, Kami Usagi Rope, Peanuts. They did a whole bunch of different crossovers with those Q Transformer figures. And as a result, Ava specifically from that being used to make Masterpiece, you know, MP10 Convoy, Ava colors, you know, and everything like that. Whole bunch of stuff. I know I'm forgetting things. There's just so much of it, but just trying to like condense it as much as I can. One of the last ones of that Japanese era though was in 2018. I actually bought it. It was probably, if you see a picture of James Roberts and me in 2018, you'll probably see it in the background behind us. The Capcom Street Fighter Anniversary Collection. They did a 30th anniversary to celebrate Street Fighter's 30th anniversary, and they did Transformer crossovers. You know, Ryu with Bison, Chun-Li with Ken, using all kinds of classics molds, or in this case, Generations and Titan Return molds and stuff like that. Cool stuff. I loved it. I love the Ken Chung-Li box set. I'd buy 100 of them if I could. They're so cool. I love it. One of my favorites personally. And then that's more or less it, because then after 2018, we go into what I call the collaborative era, which is that's how they literally label it. And in 2019, they were just like, hey, we're going to do, you know, these collaborations with different movie brands, and they're going to kind of coincidentally celebrate with other anniversaries of stuff. So like the first one in 2019, the Ghostbusters one, celebrating the anniversary of that movie, and then going into Back to the Future, celebrating the anniversary of that movie when we got the Back to the Future crossover. And again, all of these too at the same time doing little things with IDW. You know, okay, we're going to do like an IDW comic about Back to the Future with Transformers. We're going to do an IDW comic about, you know, Ghostbusters with the Transformers. So there's also that kind of flavor that's going on. Same thing, the Top Gun one, again, to celebrate with the movie. The X-Men one, that one never really had a celebration with the movie. It was just me going like, well, I guess in 2021, it's technically like the 30th anniversary of the Jim Lee comic books coming out, I guess, you could kind of say. So I guess that's kind of what it celebrated. You know, the Jurassic Park one that came out this year. You know, so there's a lot of those collaborative ones, you know, that came from that era of what Hasbro was trying to accomplish. And they keep there's more. I mean, again, we had the Universal Monsters one, the J Balvin one there, the J Balvatron, I think it was called, which was the Soundwave one. There's a whole bunch of these collaboratives. Supposedly we have an Amazon truck that's going to be coming at some point. As of this recording, it has not been revealed. They did another Ectotron, which is on shelves right now as of this recording. A lot of cool stuff. And on the girl side of things, in the girl aisle, if you go to the My Little Pony section, there's a crossover Optimus Prime My Little Pony. No surprise, also an IDW comic book of a crossover with Transformers. There's stuff that they did with Magic the Gathering, but that's not really toys. It's more trading cards. But there's a whole bunch of stuff. So to get to your second part of your question, because you wanted the history lesson, so there it was. But what about what I would like to see done? Well, I did a segment a while back talking about, like, you know, if we did Power Rangers, because Hasbro has that property and they could do something with that. That'd be cool. That'd be cool. And I don't want to repeat it again and again, but essentially I have like literally like if Boom Studios wants to do like a comic book series of this crossover Power Ranger stuff with Transformers, give me a call. I got a whole like, you know, multi-tier story that we could do over like 6 issues if needed, or 6 miniseries if needed. But I kind of fleshed it out a little bit in that previous segment, but I have a few things in my mind. But how pretty much how Hasbro wants to do it, which is always kind of collaborating with an anniversary or a crossover of a brand. I mean, next year, 2022, is going to be quite a few anniversaries of stuff. And so like the one that I always say, you know, 40th anniversary of Knight Rider, David Hasselhoff, Kit, you know, that would be such a great one. You know, just have Kit transforms into a, you know, finally we could get a Kit that's a transformer, not just a sentient car who doesn't transform. And I mean, Peter Cullen has some history with Knight Rider too, so that could be a lot of fun stuff that could be done with that. Also came out in 1982 is Macross. Now that's a tough one, because Macross and Transformers, while they do have a history in terms of molds, they also have a bad history in terms of toy companies and them fighting with each other, and Harmony Gold and Bandai. So I don't think it'll happen, but considering how much of a history Macross has with Transformers, there's a celebration right there in 1982 to 2022. 40th anniversary of Macross. Then you have one that I'm surprised they haven't done yet. Next year also is going to be the 40th anniversary of Star Trek Wrath of Khan, the second Star Trek movie, which is very iconic. And I feel that now would be a time that you could do an Enterprise, you could do a Klingon ship, and celebrate the 40th anniversary of Wrath of Khan. I'm not a big Star Trek guy. I know base level stuff, but I know what would work with the hobby. And the last one that I could mention, and this one I could also see happening because it was actually mentioned by a fan in one of my live streams on Saturday night. Next year is the 40th anniversary of Tron. And you look at that studio series, Bumblebee RC, that was shown to us not too long ago from the Hasbro Q&A roundtable. You take that RC, you retool it a little bit, you could turn that into Tron. It's the light cycle, baby. Looks beautiful, and you could do a 40th anniversary of that. So there's 4 of them right there that you could do next year if you want. Take it from me, I don't care. But I hope that kind of answers it a little bit. That's just a few of them. I mean, I'd love to see Mega Man be done, but would anyone care is the better question. You know, I'd like to see a continuation of the Street Fighter one. I was always saying, if you don't even want to make new tooling, you know, you could just repaint some previously existing molds and kind of do it. I always said like Long Arm, the animated toy, would be a perfect Dhalsim. I mean, there's so much going on there, I can't even stress. Someone's got to like really do like a good Photoshop and show like all those different modes. It'd be so cool. Either way. Anyways, I hope that answers your question. I hope that gave you a little bit of history of all the crazy crossovers and, you know, collaboratives and everything you want to call with Transformers, cameos. And I hope that kind of was entertaining. So if you want to be like Zeta Prime, ask a Patreon listener question, or you just want to throw some bucks to the podcast, come join us on the Discord and just hang out with the robots in disguise, like I like to say. Again, patreon.com/Protoman, or check the pinned comment or the description below. And rock out with the robots in disguise.